Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show, Ancient Secrets Revealed. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma in the mountains of Western North Carolina, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple. Today's topic, it starts out, I think, you can pick it up on so many levels, like anything, everything moves transgradiently. And what we're going to do is follow that continuum of, who's telling the truth, and Ancient Secrets key to that whole concept. And of course, on the most superficial level, it deals with interpersonal relationships. We all have opinions, we all have perspectives, and that's a one-on-one dynamic, it's a family dynamic, it's communities, it goes all the way to politics and international relationships, so on all levels. But in a sense, you could say that's horizontally on all levels, interpersonal, so to speak. But now what we're going to do also is going to take a look at it vertically and, just how deep does that rabbit hole go, And it's important to do that. And I'll tell you why, because first of all, understanding the degree of the interconnectedness between the surface and the depth gives us a much greater appreciation for the nature of life, for the nature of our lives, for the nature of what's even going on in our interpersonal relationships. And if we just stay up on the surface and, I have my perspective and you have yours and I'm right and you're wrong or what have you, or we're, let's agree to disagree or have, without the foundation of the nature of things, of the real nature of existence, and what the rishis have given us, what the ancients have given us about that knowledge, it becomes kind of hollow. And that's one of the troubles, I think, with spirituality in general. People read about Vedanta and, I get Vedanta. And, but they don't have the foundation, really, the deeper knowledge of it. So it remains superficial. And I also look at, like, I've done podcasts and I think I have blogs, things on YouTube, I think, about Bible quotes. And, that whole thing, I love it. And it also upsets me in a way because it's like Jesus is the only way. Well, what does that mean? In one sense, it's like, what are you trying to say? Nobody went to heaven until after Jesus was born. In another sense, you can look at it more deeply. Who is Jesus? What is Jesus? The Christ. And so many things in all the different religions, not just Christianity, but all the different religions. It's a question then of what level you pick it up on and what level you understand it on. And that makes all the difference, And I guess I could even say it's a pet peeve of mine when I see these beautiful, profound knowledges kind of picked up and understood on, a relatively superficial level, oftentimes, an astral level. So God is now some guy sitting on a cloud somewhere, as opposed to understanding the transcendental depth of existence, Anything, Scotty, Adrian? That makes sense, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And it's not a judgment of any religions or anything, but it's just, and this is tangential, admittedly, but I'm really enjoying living in these mountains. And I'm really enjoying, I've had the privilege of working with and interacting with, as far as everything from ground maintenance to what have you, of people that have lived in these mountains for generations, and every part of the country has their own identity, their own mentality. I know that the way people think in California is very different than the way people think in Rhode Island, for example. So there's a colloquialism to it, and each of these different areas have their own insights and also their own limitations. But I'm just really humbled by the insights of the people that have been living in these mountains for so many generations. They have a knowledge that, in a way of thinking, it's very humbling, and I've learned a lot from them. So anyway, that's tangential to what we're doing. today, or maybe not. But the question is this whole idea of, who's telling the truth? Just how deep does that rabbit hole go? I mean, what is truth? What is reality? And we tend to have a notion that we've been indoctrinated into. It's part of our conditioning that reality is a fixed thing that you either get or you don't. And same with truth. If you read, there's a great book, one of my favorite books, it's called The Concise Yoga Vashishta. And what that is it's a rap, if you will. It's a discussion that Vashishta, a great seer, great saint, it's a discussion he had with Lord Rama. And Lord Rama, again, depending on your angle of approach, your angle of perspective, but in the most traditional, I guess, version, Lord Rama is this incarnation of God, but he didn't really know that. And so Vashishta basically talks to him and interacts with him, and Lord Rama realizes who he is, And in that Yoga Vashishta, and I would just recommend the Concise Yoga Vashishta, because the whole thing is volumes and volumes, But it kind of frees the mind. It opens the mind, and in some chapters more than others, but to an understanding of how multidimensional and how profound the knowledge is. Because if we pursue reality, if we pursue truth, is something tangible, something we can grab onto, something we say, okay, here's the truth. Now I get the truth. You're collapsing down the whole thing into a very limited world. And it's just really, remarkable that we live in a world where that's the way most people think. And then even if we say, oh, okay, well, no, I'm beyond that. So, what's a colloquialism for that, you guys? I'm okay, you're okay, or let's agree to disagree, or the only true knowing is knowing nothing, those kind of things. Again, what does it mean on a deeper level? And it leads us to, what is truth? One saint once said that truth is what's most life-supporting for the moment. And I know some people have heard that. It's just like, oh, they just think it's terrible, because to them, there is, again, one concrete truth. And if you don't get it, you're wrong, Now, so the nature of existence, you see, it has two components to it. There's a structured component and there's an unstructured component. The structured component is fixed. It's mechanical. It's pure mathematics. The unstructured component is the opposite. It's amorphous. Lord Shiva, for example, one representation of Lord Shiva is just pick up a pebble, pick up a rock, all amorphous in different shapes. That's the nature of Lord Shiva. So the amorphic, what's another word?
Changeable, maybe?
Changeable, not
much more,
not strictly defined, not with mathematical edges and things like that, but just whatever it is. Pick up this rock, it's shaped that way. That's Shiva. Pick up another rock, it's shaped that way. It's Shiva. Because you see, the underlying basis of existence is not a concretion. It's amorphic. It's like a cosmic cloud that we rest upon, but it has no edges. Now, we can even get into, Heisenberg, the modern physicist. He talked about the probability cloud and everything in existence. And we can talk about the electron just to keep it simple. The electron is not a concrete point in space. It's a cloud, a probability cloud. What does that mean? Probably, if you try to grab on the electron, you're going to grab onto it here. but possibly it'll be over there. And it's a cloud that reaches out into infinity. So even though the probability becomes less, you could grab onto it and it could be on the other side of the moon. It's a little bit like if you take a dump truck full of sand, each pebble of sand, each grain of sand being a electron, and you dump it out the back of the dump truck, you're going to get a pile every time. But there will be some electrons, some grains of sand that bounce off, and you find them, 20 feet away from the truck. Existence is like that. So we get into this whole notion of even free will or predetermination. Is it predetermined where each grain of sand hits and where it ends up? Or is there a level of free will? What is God's will? We can say, well, if it's God's will, but what does that even mean? And in one sense, see, God's will comes in two forms. One is infinite freedom. God, and even you, if your will is aligned with God's will, in other words, if your awareness is free, then that course of life has a lot more dynamism, a lot more freedom to it than if you are limited by the karmic programming of your own awareness. And that determines what you think and where you think it should go. Now, if you have a whole globe of people, a whole world of people, and we do have a whole world of people where the global consciousness is highly conditioned. Oh, you might be conditioned to think this way, and they might be conditioned to think that way, but it's one big continuum of conditioning. So the amorphic, free, unbounded nature of existence all of a sudden becomes contracted down, collapsed down to this perspective and that perspective. And this is what reality is. And no, reality is this. And the whole thing becomes limited and tight. And we can't just say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to be open-minded, because now you're clinging to the contracted notion, the limited notion of what an open-mindedness means. That's not how it works. We're talking about a state of physiology. You see, I know Lily Tomlin has a quote that I like, reality is a collective hunch. And I like that quote. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that it's no holds barred and well, you have your truth and I have my truth. So let's take a deeper look here at the nature of existence. You see, there's it's just so beautiful, and the whole mechanic of it is just so incredible. In the manifestation of this existence, there is the structured component, which defines the laws of nature, of our prapancham, but commonly we use the word universe. Universe is used in a different way in Vedic to include all the different, what we call universes. There's one universe and a bunch of prapanchams, okay? So, but for each prapancham, our universe as we know it, as an example, there's a certain set of laws of natures, the elements, the 5 elements, the parameters of life. And that's highly defined. It's in the geometric structure of the underlying basis of existence, very mathematical, the self-interacting dynamic of pure consciousness that I've talked about before. And that's where these images of these yantras come from. In other words, yantras being a geometric representation of the structure of existence. And again, keep in mind, again, a little tangential, but these yantras, the translation is machine. So though we look at yantras as stagnant, fixed images, they're actually dynamic, like a machine, mechanical, okay? And those structures come from the rishis, and the head rishi, so to speak, the son of Brahma, the creator, Brahma being that aspect of oneness, and there are an infinite number of different aspects, right? Different facets of the same one diamond. the name and the personified correlate to that name for the aspect of creation that, manifested, created this universe is Brahma. The son of Brahma is called Atri. Now, Atri is a rishi. And Atri then is the giver of all the structure. And that's why they call the rishis the upholders of Dharma. The upholders of Dharma. The Dharma meaning the life in accord with nature. So we live in accord with that, but nevertheless, there's a lot of freedom around it. It's like in a guitar string. It's a string, it's rigid, it's defined, it's structured, but depending on how you pluck it, you can get all different kind of sounds out of it. And existence is the same way. So there's infinite freedom. At the same time, there's precise structure, okay? And as we free our minds, not just as attitude, but as a state of physiology, we find a lot more freedom. And as our notion of freedom changes, we start to realize that freedom doesn't mean, oh, I'm free to do whatever I want. Freedom means aligning our awareness with the unbounded nature of divinity. The freedom to locate that electron of Heisenberg's probability cloud in different places, not just as opposed to just having to think one way and that's it. And again, thinking we can think different ways isn't thinking different ways. That's just confining our thinking to the notion of thinking different ways. Very different, you see? So now, the mapping of the whole thing, and I've talked about this, I think, in the past in a podcast, perhaps, but the mapping is interesting. Everything maps. Everything maps on everything else. And one particularly beautiful mapping is the mapping. I'm getting a little tweak here. I don't know what that noise is. The mapping of the structure of the cosmos from the perspective of the Earth. And it talks about the pole star. Everything revolves around that one fixed point being pure isness, pure consciousness, oneness, the unified field, God, if you will. And then you've got the 7 rishis. So those are the 7 sapta rishis, the main rishis. And each one of those rishis corresponds to a different star in the Big Dipper. And as the Big Dipper, as you go from one season to the next, it's rotating around the pole star. So if you took 4 pictures and superimposed them through the 4 seasons, what do you end up with? You end up with a swastika image. And that's what the swastika, that nature of the swastika being very fundamental to the nature and structure of existence, is a very beautiful mapping. And again, the swastika exists transgradiently like everything else, but that's the real meaning of the swastika. And yeah, unfortunately, they took the swastika and turned it into something that people don't even like to think about. But that's the fundamental nature of what the real meaning of it is. The world becomes a better place, not because we stay on the surface and try to find a reality that best serves the world, be it a Democrat, or be it a Republican, or be it a communist, or be it whatever. That's just trying to control the transgradient nature of existence by hanging on to one perspective, one, we could say, a reality, because there's a certain level of reality to all these different perspectives, but it comes from functioning from a place where we're in harmony with nature, in harmony with Mother Nature. And we function then in accord with the laws of nature, in accord with the upholders of Dharma, the rishis. But nevertheless, there's a lot of freedom and dynamism around it, you see?
Michael, isn't it kind of like we're transgradient beings? We're really, everybody on occasion spontaneously transcends. You're standing on a mountaintop, looking in the face of your baby, sunrise, there are those moments that you just go to that deeper place.
Sure.
And there's a feeling level of that deeper place. And
well, we have to be a little careful there because, yes, you're right. But at the same time, just because we're feeling a nice feeling doesn't mean that we're transcending. And that, in fact, becomes a
yes,
common mistake, doesn't it?
yes,
Yeah,
yes, that's
yeah.
right. That's right. But I think, what we tend to do as humans is we're up in our head and we're thinking. And
Or feeling based on a conditioning and a programming.
true. That's
Yeah.
right. Which then bubbles up into thoughts or actions, or, you know what I mean? The whole thing becomes a state of kind of, I don't know, confused action.
Limitation.
Almost.
Yeah.
Very limited.
Identity with limitation and the pursuit of truth, which is beyond limitation.
Right. And that's a structured, fixed, kind of frozen almost place we're coming from.
Yeah.
But then when we go deeper, whether it's spontaneously transcending, and I'm talking about when you really are, you're in that place. We humans have the ability to go from that place of transcendence to this, frozen, rigid identities that we functioned from. And
yes, and see, the way you say it is good that we go to that place, but ultimately the state of enlightenment is when both are there at the same time. So you're functioning within the limitations of the current global consciousness.
Yes.
Interfacing with that, whatever it is, and it's right now quite contracted, quite, controlled by these identities with these different perspectives. And you function and interface with that, whereas you don't lose yourself, your transcendental self, that place within that sees beyond it all. And that's paradoxical, because you're functioning in the world. You have your passions, you have your convictions. On the surface, it looks like anybody else, but it's coming from a place of transcendental depth, transgradiently integrated with the depth of your being simultaneously. Yeah.
And that's how you come to know the truth, right? You try to maybe calm the heightened emotions and
well, you don't try. It's a beautiful
thinking.
let me say there are two modalities, so to speak, where you come upon that. And within the structure of resistance, there are all kinds of different ways of viewing it. 2 boxes or 3. When you look through a kaleidoscope, are you seeing a dance of 2 colors or 3 colors, or is it the 5 branches of the snowflake that get created there or whatever? And another way is the 9 grahas. And those map onto planets, but the 9 grahas are operators within the structure of the unified field. And 2 of those grahas are really what we're talking about here, Adrian. And I think because we have Jupiter and we have Saturn. Saturn is the one where we move beyond our identities with our limited thinking just through life's hard knocks. You know what? We tried this. It's not working. And we might cling on to something for a lifetime even. But at some point in time, it's too limited. Life is bigger. And so sooner or later, it ceases to work. And what do we do now? And so that's Saturn. And that's why people are afraid of Saturn, because, lessons through hard knocks. But then there's also Jupiter, Brihaspati. Jupiter is the benefic guru, the guru who hands you knowledge on a silver platter. And so you see there are 2 components. There's life experiences, and there's also deeper knowledge. And the deepest knowledge then is what you're getting at there, Adrian, I think, and that is to transcend, where you're given a technique where the awareness just naturally gravitates to that place, and then you go back into activity, and then it gravitates to that place. There's a nice expression. It's actually a song, but also Edgar Casey wrote a book called There Is a River, and it's like that. There is a river. There is a place deep inside. It's a source of divinity, of unbounded nature. And when you connect to that and stay with that, not because it's an attitude, not because it's a belief, but because it's a state of physiology, then that, not to get too poetic, but that river quenches your thirst, you know, and you then live in harmony with nature while still functioning on the surface, transgradiently integrated. Am I on the right track there, Adrian?
Yes, absolutely. You're talking about, how do you know the truth? Well, it's not when you're chattering up in your head. It's when you're able to, you know, travel those inner landscapes where that wisdom is allowed to bubble up.
And so
Because I
then
think
it
we all get
becomes,
stuck.
yeah, yeah. And it becomes so paradoxical because in that state, even when you make a statement is a contracted value. It's identifying the electron at a particular point in space-time. And at the same time, you see beyond that. So even your own words, you see the futility in them. You see the limitation of them. You see that the real truth with a capital T, which is unbounded, undefined, amorphic, is beyond that. It's beyond words, you see, like that. And we all sense it to different degrees. And, oh, yeah, it's beyond words I can't even describe. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the deepest level we're able to sense and feel into now isn't on a regular basis is the deepest level of existence there is. And at the same time, like Adrian was saying, it's kind of funny because we all do transcend every day. There's brief moments when we transcend, and we may not even identify them accurately. Oh, I'm feeling all this love. I'm in the transcendent, you know. It's an interesting. This I think applies. So many times somebody's come up to me and they'll say, "Oh, I just met, the man of my dreams or the woman of my dreams, and he's never studied any of this stuff, but he knows everything you're saying. He just lives it." And I just say, "Oh, that's wonderful," and then they come back a few months later and they're like, "Oh, remember I told you about that guy? I was so completely wrong. He has no idea what you're talking about." So it's a very interesting dynamic because when you fall in love, you see that divinity within people, the person you fell in love with. But if they're not really living it, if you're not really living it, then it becomes a brief moment of transcending as opposed to an ongoing dynamic. You see? Does that help at all?
Yeah. That was really neat to relate it to relationships. I hadn't quite thought of it like that, but that can be so true.
And we do well to in our daily activity if we can do it, And again, it's really structured in consciousness. It's a function of the nature of your physiology, and I don't mean physical physiology and blood chemistry. I mean physiology of your awareness. You see, but nevertheless, having that knowledge, Brahaspati, the guru that gives knowledge on the silver platter, having that knowledge helps one to free their awareness from that vice-like grip they have on what they believe is the truth and what they believe the facts are. It's not the thing, it's your relationship with the thing. Anything else, you guys? I mean, I think that pretty much says it. Yeah. All right. This is something to give.
Did you address the predetermined and free will aspect? Did I?
Well, in a way, I did, but we can do it again because we have predetermined. You see, God's will comes in two forms. One is just karma, the laws of cause and effect, and all that is predetermined. If you had if you roll the balls on a billiard table and you had a computer that knew the, elasticity of the cushions, the frictional factor of the felt, the spin and momentum and all that of the ball, you could calculate and know exactly where that ball was going to stop. And like that, from a purely karmic point of view, this whole universe is a bunch of billiard balls bouncing around. And if you had a big enough computer, you would know the future. And that's called predetermination. But that's God's will. But there's another aspect of God's will, which is freedom, grace, the ability to have your awareness freed from the, see, most of your thoughts, most of your attitudes, most of our feelings, they're purely karmic. But there is that place that goes beyond karma. It's a place of free will. And that's where you can start to not be compelled to locate that electron at a specific spot, you know? And all of life is like that. Life is amorphic. It's just our karmic relationship with it that makes everything so predetermined. And if the whole world became free of that limitation, we could create heaven on earth, you know? And that's really what Mount Soma is about, you know, is building that unified field generator, that place that wells that divinity up from the very foundation of existence and radiates it out to the environment, you know? And that knowledge was given to us by Mamuni Mayan. He was kind of like the Vishwakarma of this earth, the cosmic architect. And so there is a technology there where we can do that. We can build that and free humanity from the limitation that causes suffering and discomfort and climate change in an undesirable way and everything. And that's really the foundation to a bountiful life, you see. And the waves of karma now are supporting that transition. I've talked about that because karma comes in waves. And small waves, the sun rises, the sun sets, big waves, the yugas. And we're coming out into a wave of the depth of ignorance into the an enlightened age. So this is all happening, and I've talked about the phase transition, and that's why so much craziness is going on in the world today, because that moment of phase transition. But they say it's like a sawtooth graph, you know, crummy, really getting bad, really getting bad. But when that phase transition happens, it's a sawtooth, boom. So the age of enlightenment will come quickly once we get through this little hump that we're enduring for who knows how long. I don't think more than a few years at most, but we'll notice quantum leaps in the right direction along the way, you see. Okay, I guess that's about it. I hope you enjoyed listening, and we'll talk to you again next time on Ancient Secrets Revealed.